Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Pango. So Pango is a core hero that plays either mid or off lane, and whether he's a better mid or off lane usually depends on the meta, or how his skills are adjusted through each patch, as they've changed slightly over the years. And he doesn't really play support, definitely not a carry. If anything, he maybe could play 4 position, but that's pretty rare. He would have to be very, very broken for him to play 4 position, or something would have to change pretty drastically. In general, there are a few main ways to think about Pango. He's a very mobile hero, and he's great at clearing waves and getting farm, but his most defining aspect is his fighting ability. And I say fighting because he's great at everything from ganking to small skirmishes to big team fights. His ultimate is great at causing chaos for the enemy team. He can do everything from stun locking a core hero to hunting down supports. And his abilities are less like Tide or Enigma, where they have this, one gigantic team fight ability, and more like Primal Beast, where there's a bunch of low cooldown skirmishing spells that you want to use constantly. So in short, Pango wants to fight. And in those rare instances when he doesn't want to fight, he's great at pushing side lanes and being very elusive. But before we can understand how to play Pango, we have to take a look at his abilities. So now that we understand Pango in general, let's take a look at his abilities. So first we're going to take a look at Swashbuckle. So this is a vector targeting ability, which means you kind of hold it down. You press where you want to jump to, because he will jump to that location, and then you press, or you kind of hold in the direction that you want him to swashbuckle. So you can see what I mean in a second. So we'll do it here to the axe. So you kind of jump over there, and then you swashbuckle. You kind of use your sword in that direction to damage the enemy or the creeps in that direction. So basically you can kind of do that in anywhere in this AoE, in any direction. So that's what I mean by vector targeting. I think it may have been the first hero actually in the game to have that kind of targeting, but there are a few other heroes that have similar things now these days. But this is very good because this ability actually works with your it like procs items, so like Deso or Maelstrom, that kind of stuff. So it works with your right click, so it can scale into the later portion of the game, which makes this ability really, really good. And it's very good for clearing waves, but also very good for obviously doing a lot of damage to heroes after you use your other abilities or before or whenever. You can do decent amount of damage from like long range. You can kind of jump over here and hit him just with the end of that little the little sword there, and it still does like the same amount of damage. You can see it also does multiple instances, so it's not just one. That's why Maelstrom can be good, because like every little poke is its own instance, which means you can proc Maelstrom a bunch. So that's Swashbuckle. Next we have Shield Crash. You basically press the ability and you jump forward and crash in an AoE, do damage, and also you can see I'll use it to axe here. And you also, I believe, slow a little bit, which is very, very good. You also reduce your own damage based on the amount of basic heroes, things that you hit in this shield crash. You get this little shield above you. So you can see there, if the axe hits me, it takes away the shield. So the more things you're hitting with the shield crash, the more of a shield that you get. In the past, it used to be percentage damage. So if you like shield crash 3 or 4 heroes, you just like could not die, which was pretty crazy. But now it's not as broken, but who knows, maybe they'll go back to that sometime as well. So just keep that in mind. Next, we have Lucky Shot. It's a passive ability. So you can see if I just like right-click the axe here, every once in a while this little thing will come up. An axe can still attack, but it's like insanely slow. So you can see there the attack speed and the armor reduction is very good. So that also scales really well with other, right-click abilities too. And obviously this Swashbuckle is a right-click ability, so the armor reduction is very good. Now in the past it used to disarm. Now it just reduces attack speed, which is not as good, obviously, but the attack speed is so much, at least once you max this out, that it might as well be a disarm. It's just that early on it's not as good as it used to be. So just keep that in mind. Who knows, maybe they'll change that back to a disarm in the past, like it used to be in the past. So that's Lucky Shot. Actually, I think in the past, like way, way long ago, it also used to disarm and silence, which was insane. So it doesn't silence. It hasn't silenced for a long time. I don't think they'll ever bring that back. Then, lastly, we have Rolling Thunder. So this is the ultimate that I talked about. So it has a cast animation. You can see, after that pretty long cast animation, you basically are BKB'd. So you only get stunned by things like, you can actually get stunned by the axe call here, but you just kind of go and you click in the direction. You can't just like make a hard right turn. You have to like slowly turn, kind of like a wheel, like a car. Like it can't just make a insane easy 90-degree turn or whatever. You have to kind of roll around, but you also bounce off of other things. Like here's the edge of the map, so I bounce, boom, and I can turn myself, bounce off this tree here, and then hit the axe again. So this is really, really good in situations like in the mid lane or whatever, where there's a lot of different walls you can bounce off of. You can stun lock people. The other thing you can do is you can also use this and then like swashbuckle out of it to end it early. So let's say, you know, you're in a very open spot like we are here, and you just hit this guy and you stun him once. Well, you don't really want to wait till it comes back there and like goes all the way back here, because he's going to run away, you know what I mean, or use other abilities, that kind of stuff. So you can just actually hit them once and then swashbuckle out of it. Then the last thing I'll say about this is you can also use shield crash during. So that's really good. So you can kind of jump over cliffs with that. Maybe I'll be able to show you if it lasts long enough. Yeah, I can jump over cliffs here, which is great. And you can kind of jump into enemies with that, which helps because it does more damage. It gives you the shield, all that kind of stuff, which is very, very good. I will briefly talk about the shard and the scepter. The scepter just allows you, when you shield crash, to like have swashbuckles coming out of the side of you and in the front of you at like 90-degree angles, which is insane. You do insane damage. You can proc Lucky Shot. Obviously, it just like kind of scales the hero's damage and abilities like a lot into the late game. And the other thing is the Agnum Shard gives you a new ability called Roll Up. So when you use this, you become, you know, you have this little BKB thing showing there, and if you get attacked, so I'll show you, if the axe attacks you, you kind of like run away automatically, which is pretty good because it just gives you this extra save. And what you can do is you can actually use this ability and then roll up in the middle of it. So like I said before, I think or what I will say in a bit, actually, is that one of the things about this hero is you don't want to, like, in the very beginning of the game, you kind of can just swashbuckle in and then Rolling Thunder. But what you don't want to do is just, like, later in the game, just do this and then, like, try to Rolling Thunder, because then someone's going to, like, stun you or whatever. Then you could actually die. So what you can do instead is actually use this, you know, press this ability and then Rolling Thunder, which is a lot better than just like going in and pressing this. Or you can use this at the end, or you can use this even in the middle of your ability to kind of turn and then keep going. So you can just have like a, you can kind of do a 90-degree turn. You can even like pause and stop on top of people. There's all these little things you can do, little quirks you can do with the abilities to make this hero have a pretty high skill cap. So that is Pango. Those are his abilities. Now let's look at how to play him in an actual game. Now that we understand Pango's abilities, we can take a look at how to actually play him in a game. So the first thing to know about Pango is that his laning stage is not that great. That doesn't mean he's the weakest laner of all time. Obviously, he is a mid hero, but his laning stage is more about getting as much farm and experience as you can to secure your level 6 as soon as possible. So there are matchups where you can dominate from the mid or off lane position, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, you're just going to be spending that first 5 to 10 minutes doing your best to get what you can out of the lane and using your mobility to make sure that you don't die. Once you hit level 6, however, the entire game changes and Pango becomes a new hero. Now it's the enemy who has to be wary of where they're walking for fear of Pango ulting in and killing them at any moment. Pango's ult is very difficult to deal with throughout most of the game, but early game especially, it's almost always deadly if he's able to get on top of an enemy hero. So the strategy for Pango after hitting 6 is to essentially fight every time you have your ultimate. Now, obviously, there's always going to be certain amounts of playing around your team, and Pango is definitely capable of getting solo pickoffs, especially in the mid lane where there's a lot of different places to bounce around for your ultimate and stun lock opponents. But it's still going to be best if you can coordinate ganks or tower defenses with your team. Then once your ultimate is on cooldown, if your team doesn't look ready to fight, then Pango is a great hero at pushing out side lanes, and his spells are great at clearing waves and short enough of a cooldown that it can still be very hard to catch him out of position if the enemy's looking to gank. Then once you get to late game team fights, the only real difference in playstyle for the hero is whether or not you want to use swashbuckle before your roll. So like I talked about before, sometimes you can kind of swashbuckle in because you want to get that early damage and then you try to roll, but you know, that can be dangerous later in the game where the enemy has stuns that are instant, you know, hexes, something like that, or even BKB piercing stuns where even though you try to get your shard off or whatever, that you just aren't able to get your roll off. So that can be very dangerous because if you're not able to get your roll off, then you kind of just eliminate your entire team impact from those late game team fights. So a lot of the time you actually want to just start your roll early, kind of behind the fight, out of vision, and then jump into the team fight and then cause chaos that way as a counter initiation, not as an initiation. Because the problem with initiating with the hero is that a lot of the times, if you just use your roll too early, or you kind of jump in and try to use it, the enemy at that point has a lot of items. They can just disperse, they can blink away, all that kind of stuff. And then if you end up using your ult and they do run away, they do retreat, now you don't have an ult, they can regroup and they can push, which can be a bit of a problem for the hero. So aside from these general ideas, there's a lot of little things that you can do with Pango that make the hero have a very high skill ceiling, I think like I mentioned before, but I can't teach you all those little things in this guide. It just would be too much time. A lot of stuff comes from experience. So once you get the basics down, you should definitely go and watch pro players like Quinn for advanced strategies to use to allow you to just get better at games, to get better at the hero, and then you can dominate games with this hero, because this hero definitely can solo carry games. And that, everyone, is my Pango guide. If you liked the video or found it helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.